Part 1, The Cursed Collector's Piece. Jonathan Reyes had an obsession, a quiet, costly, and utterly peculiar obsession, not with fame, not with fortune, but with objects that should not be alive, items whispered to carry a presence, a memory, a curse. Over the years, he had acquired a notorious collection, a violin that screeched in silence, a painting that bled at the stroke of midnight. Red paint, the skeptics said, but the forensics told another story. And a grandfather clock that chimed 13 times, only on the anniversary of its owner's suicide. All these relics were meticulously cataloged, archived, and sealed behind thick glass in a temperature-controlled wing of his estate in London, known only to a few as the glass room. Jonathan was not insane. He was meticulous. He was curious. He was, above all, thorough. Which is why when he found the doll in a back alley antique shop in a forgotten corner of Dorset, it was not impulse that made him buy it. It was the laugh. The sky that day hung low and bruised, threatening a downpour. The town of Dorset looked like it hadn't seen sunlight or visitors for weeks. Most shops had closed early. Only one storefront remained lit, a faded wooden sign swinging in the wind, creaking overhead like an old moan. Elois's Antiques. Jonathan stepped inside, the bell above the door letting out a strangled jingle. The shop smelled of damp velvet and mothballs. Piles of mismatched furniture leaned against taxidermied birds. Porcelain faces stared out from behind cracked display cases. And in the back, under a dusty linen cloth, sat her. Jonathan paused. Something had drawn him to that corner like a magnet. He reached forward and pulled the sheet away. The doll was not small, not a child's toy. It was nearly 3 feet tall, made entirely of pale porcelain, sculpted with the detail of a museum piece. Her eyes were painted with uncanny precision, blue-gray with tiny veins in the sclera. Her lips were curled into the slightest smile, not quite joyous, not quite malicious, just amused. Her hair was real. Blonde ringlets framed a face too symmetrical to be innocent. She wore a white Victorian dress, stained yellow with age, the lace at the collar fraying delicately like dying spiderwebs. A small metal plaque on her wooden pedestal read, "Marion, property of the Halloran family, 1893. Jonathan took a slow breath. "I wouldn't if I were you," came a croaky voice behind him. An old woman stood at the end of the aisle, stooped, cloud-eyed, wearing 3 shawls and a look of genuine concern. "She's not for sale," she added. Jonathan turned. "Why not?" "Because she doesn't like being moved," he smiled politely. "She's an object. She doesn't have preferences." The old woman didn't smile back. She was the only thing that survived when the Halloran estate burned down. No charring, no soot, just there, sitting in the ashes, smiling. Jonathan's curiosity blazed. "I'll take her." The delivery 2 days later, the doll arrived at Jonathan's estate. He had a special case prepared, double reinforced glass, humidity-controlled interior, custom LED lighting. The statue was placed alone in the center of the glass room, an enormous space with mirrored walls and pressure-locked doors. Visitors needed a special badge and 2 security checks to enter. Jonathan admired her through the glass, sipping a neat glass of whiskey. "Welcome home, Marion," he whispered. That night, he dreamed of fire. The first night, at precisely 3:12 a.m., Jonathan woke up gasping. He had no recollection of the dream, only the sensation of suffocating heat and soft giggles echoing somewhere nearby. His bedroom was dark, still, silent, except a faint sound, laughter, childlike, delicate, but wrong, off, like the sound of a child pretending to laugh. Jonathan sat up, straining his ears. The sound seemed to be coming from the hall. He rose, wrapped himself in a robe, and padded barefoot through the corridor. The house was vast and quiet. Security lights glowed faintly along the floors. He approached the glass room. The door was closed, locked. He typed in the passcode and opened it. The lights were dimmed to their night setting. The air inside smelled faintly of dust and disinfectant. And Marion stood there, still, smiling. Jonathan walked around the glass case slowly. No movement. He checked the sensors. No alert, no motion. The cameras had recorded nothing. Still, as he walked away, he could swear he heard her giggle again. Camera check. The next morning, he reviewed the footage. 12 hours of surveillance, nothing, not a flicker. He zoomed in on the footage from 3 a.m., static, for exactly 1 minute. Then it resumed. He rewound. The static wasn't there before, but now it was, as if something knew he was watching. He paused the feed on 3:02 a.m. Marion's eyes were facing forward. He jumped to 3:13 a.m. Her eyes were turned to the left. The housekeeper, Jonathan's longtime housekeeper, Lydia, was the first to notice something was truly wrong. She had worked for him for nearly a decade and had grown used to his oddities. But she refused to enter the glass room. "She watches me," Lydia said flatly one morning, pouring coffee with shaking hands. Jonathan laughed. "It's a statue." "It smiles wider when no one's there," she said, eyes dark. "I heard her, and I don't want to be in this house if you keep her." He brushed her off. That evening, Lydia packed her bags and left without saying goodbye. Deeper obsession. Jonathan began spending more time in the room. He studied the way the light reflected in Marion's eyes. He noted how dust settled differently around her base. She never moved, but the feeling of presence in the room thickened like humidity. He installed motion sensors inside the case itself, a small microphone. Night after night, he waited. On the fifth night, it happened again. 3:14 a.m. The microphone picked up something faint, a breath. Then a whisper, "Why won't you talk to me?" Jonathan froze. The voice was high-pitched, young, female. He played it again and again, slowing it down, filtering it. The waveform wasn't mechanical, it wasn't faked, and the sensors? No movement, nothing moved. The visitor, he invited his colleague, Claire Atwell, a documentary filmmaker and known skeptic, to come inspect it. "I'm telling you," he said, "there's something in there, something alive." Claire laughed. "You've been breathing too much varnish?" Still, she came. She filmed everything, his estate, the room, the statue. She's creepy, I'll give you that, filming from outside the glass. That smile's nightmare fuel. She leaned close. "Come on, Marion, give us a sign." Nothing happened until later that night. Claire stayed in the guest room. Jonathan retired early. At around 2:50 a.m., the house system logged a temperature drop in the glass room. At 3:15 a.m., Claire screamed. Jonathan found her downstairs, clutching her phone, white as a sheet. "She moved," she whispered. "She looked at me." They reviewed the phone video. It was normal at first, Claire joking, zooming in on the statue. Then, just at the end, Marion's head turned slightly, and from the phone's audio, a giggle, right next to the mic. But Claire had been alone. End of part 1. Jonathan didn't sleep the next night. He sat alone in the glass room, surrounded by mirrored walls, staring at the pale doll behind the glass, waiting. And sometime, deep into the night, when the world outside was asleep, she laughed again. But this time, he laughed with her. Part 2. The smile when no one's looking. One silence that watches. Jonathan Reyes stopped inviting guests. After Claire's visit and the disturbing footage of the doll's subtle movement and whispery giggle, something had shifted, not just in the house, but within him. He told himself he remained skeptical. He told himself it could have been a camera glitch, could have been auditory pareidolia, could have been anything. But that night, for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his own skin, not metaphorically, literally. As he lay in bed, half asleep, the skin between his shoulder blades began to tingle, as if unseen eyes were crawling across his spine. The air in the house had a weight to it now. Even during the day, silence pressed in like a hand across the mouth. He took to sleeping with his bedroom door locked. But the laughter, it still found its way through. The turning head. Over the next week, the changes grew bolder. The statue's head, always facing forward in its locked glass case, began to face left each morning. Jonathan would correct it. By evening, it would be straight again. The cameras, of course, saw nothing. He increased the sensitivity of the sensors, set up EMF readers, thermal imaging, even a LiDAR scanner to detect the slightest vibration or shift. Still nothing. The equipment recorded zero movement, yet he could see the doll had turned, every night, every single time. And with each new morning, the smile seemed a little wider. Not physically, no, Jonathan checked, measured, compared, but it felt wider. 3. The house reacts. The house began to act strangely. Lights in the east wing flickered and dimmed. Jonathan's phone screen turned on at odd hours, only to show the camera feed from the glass room, even when he hadn't opened the app. Objects in the home were misplaced. A glass left on the counter now shattered on the floor. A clock rewound 10 minutes behind. His shaving mirror cracked down the middle with tiny handprints smudged across it. His cleaning staff refused to come back. "It's the laugh," one said on the phone. It doesn't sound human anymore. But it never did, Jonathan replied quietly. For researching Marion, Jonathan became obsessed. He dove deep into the Halloran family archives. Anything he could find about the girl whose name was etched onto the doll's base. Marion Halloran, born 1887, died in a house fire at age 6. The blaze started in the nursery. All 4 members of the Halloran family perished, except Marion's doll, which was found intact, sitting in the center of the charred floor. Several papers reported the odd condition of the toy, untouched by fire, its face smudged with something red. One article quoted a firefighter, "It was smiling. I swear to you it looked at me before they bagged it." More chilling was a diary entry from a governess employed by the Hallorans 2 weeks before the fire. Marion plays with the doll all day, speaks to it in long, whispered conversations. She says the doll tells her jokes. When I asked what kind, she only smiled and said, "It's secret laughter for when you're not here." Number 5. Visitors in the mirror. The first mirror incident happened in Jonathan's study. Late one night, while reviewing thermal footage, he glanced up and caught movement in the tall standing mirror by the fireplace. But the room behind him was still. He turned around. Nothing. But when he looked back into the mirror, there was a child's face behind his left shoulder, faint, pale, smiling. He spun around, but again the room was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, it was gone. 6. Laughter in daylight. The laughter no longer respected the dark. It came in the morning, woven through birdsong and wind chimes. It came at noon. While Jonathan sat at his desk, clear as a bell like a giggle just beyond the wall. He tested the room for sound leaks, installed new insulation, sealed every crack. But the laughter wasn't leaking in from the outside. It was rising from within the walls. Sometimes he'd catch a word, hide, watch, watch, smile, the footsteps. The doll never moved in front of him. But Jonathan began to hear footsteps in the glass room. Light, playful steps, like a barefoot child running in circles. One evening at 3 a.m., he sat in the dark corner of the room, not breathing. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the glass case trembled, though no air moved. A shape flickered across the mirrored wall. Not a reflection, a presence, small and giggling. He left the room that night and locked the door behind him, but as he walked away, a soft tapping followed him on the glass from the inside. 8. The smiling portrait. Jonathan commissioned an artist to sketch the doll. He didn't say why, only sent her photos and offered double the standard rate. 2 days later, she called him, shaken. "I'm sorry," she said. "I can't finish this piece." "Why not?" "Because every time I draw her smile, it looks different. It doesn't match the photo. It's like it's changing." "What do you mean?" "I swear, it's like she's enjoying this." Number 9. Claire returns. Claire came back to the estate, this time not as a skeptic. She had edited the footage from her previous visit and enhanced the audio. There was something in the background of the laugh, a voice, a second giggle, and a whisper that, when reversed, sounded like, "He belongs to me now." They both watched the footage in silence. Claire turned to Jonathan. "You have to destroy it." He said nothing, just stared through the monitor, transfixed. 10. Marion's voice. The whispering increased. It became distinct. "Jonathan, Jonathan, stay with me. Don't let them take me away." He stopped answering his phone. Emails piled up. The outside world began to fade. His eyes grew darker, more sunken. His hair thinned. He smiled less, slept less, but he spent more time in the glass room. Sometimes Claire called his name for several minutes before he answered, sitting motionless in a chair across from the statue, smiling faintly, eyes unblinking. 11. Something's missing. Claire tried to intervene. She called a priest, a paranormal investigator, a therapist. No one lasted more than 20 minutes in the house. One medium fainted after entering the glass room. The only thing he said before losing consciousness was, "She has a name now," and he gave it to her. Jonathan refused to let anyone touch the case. He insisted the statue hadn't moved, that it was safe, that it was just misunderstood. But things began disappearing from the estate. A painting went missing from the hallway. A mirror shattered and was never replaced. A framed photo of Jonathan as a child vanished, replaced with an old black and white photo of an unfamiliar little girl with blonde curls. Claire confronted him. Jonathan only shrugged. "She's always been here," he said softly. 12. The turning point. One night, Claire stayed longer than usual. At 2:47 a.m., she went to the kitchen for water. The hallway was dark. As she passed the glass room, she paused. She could hear whispering. Not one voice, multiple, layered, like a child rehearsing lines for a play. Slowly she walked to the door. The lights inside were off. The glass fogged from the inside. She leaned closer, a small handprint pressed against the inside of the door. Another and another. Too many hands. The whispers stopped. Then as she turned to run, laughter, low, joyous, wild. She fled. 13. The decision. The next day, Claire returned with gasoline and a hammer. Jonathan stopped her at the door. "You don't understand," he said. "She's not evil. She's just lonely. She's using you," Claire said. "She's feeding off you. You're wrong. You're not even you anymore." That night, Claire stayed awake, watching Jonathan through the cracked office door. He stood in front of Marion's glass case, whispering. For 2 hours, she couldn't hear the words, but she saw him lean in. And the next morning, the glass was open. End of part 2. In the quiet stillness of the house, Jonathan now walked more slowly, spoke less, smiled more. And Marion, though still motionless in her case, had begun to resemble him, just slightly in the arch of her eyebrows, the set of her jaw. Claire knew time was running out. Jonathan was no longer keeping a cursed object. He was becoming one. Part 3. The Smile That Stayed. 1. The Hollow House. By late autumn, Jonathan Reyes' estate had grown quiet. Too quiet. Most of the furniture was covered in sheets. Doors remained closed, rooms untouched. The east wing had been without power for weeks, yet he hadn't bothered to call anyone. He didn't need electricity anymore, not when he only stayed in one place, the glass room. It had become his sanctuary, his cell, his chapel. Every day, he sat on the floor beside the glass case that held Marion, the doll whose smile no longer seemed painted but grown. The housekeeper had quit. The cleaners never came back. Claire no longer called. Jonathan didn't mind. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. 2. The glass opens. Claire returned one last time. She didn't knock. She had a key. The house was so still it felt dead. She moved cautiously through the halls, calling his name. No answer. When she reached the glass room, her heart dropped. The door was open, the room dim. Jonathan stood motionless in the center, staring down at the case where Marion used to sit. The glass panel lay shattered on the ground. "Jonathan," she whispered. He turned slowly. His eyes were vacant, ringed in purple. His lips twitched into a slow, creeping smile. "She's out," he said, voice barely audible. "She trusts me now." 3. Fractured reality. Claire demanded to know what happened. Jonathan said nothing more. That night, she stayed in the guest room and locked the door, but sleep did not come. The floor creaked outside. Soft footsteps. Not Jonathan's. Smaller. Then came the laughter, sweet and high, echoing under the door, like a child skipping just beyond the threshold. Claire pressed her hand over her mouth. When she looked at the floor, tiny shadows moved underneath it. She turned on the light. Gone. But her phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. The glass room. Even though the glass was broken, the sensors were still active. She opened the camera feed. The room was empty, except for the doll, sitting in the center of the floor, facing the camera, smiling. 4. The fire plan. The next morning, Claire confronted Jonathan. "She's not a little girl. She's a parasite. She's growing stronger." Jonathan nodded vaguely, as if distracted. "I think you're right," he said. "I think it's time." Hope flared in Claire's chest. "We burn her." Jonathan didn't answer. That night, they prepared. Gasoline, a metal drum, lighter fluid. They brought the doll outside just after midnight, placed her carefully into the drum behind the greenhouse. Claire hesitated. "Are you sure?" Jonathan stared at the statue. His fingers twitched. "She'll forgive me," he said too softly. He struck the match. The flame licked the edge of the drum. Then it went out. A cold wind swept through the yard. No source, no reason. Claire lit another match. It flared, then died instantly. A giggle drifted on the breeze, low, mocking. And the doll was no longer in the drum. 5. The disappearance. Claire turned to scream, but Jonathan was gone. The house was dark, all lights extinguished. Her phone had no signal. She searched room by room, calling for him, but the halls twisted strangely now. Each step felt doubled, as though space had thickened. The mirrors along the wall no longer showed her reflection. Instead, they showed Marion, sitting, standing, smiling. In one mirror, the doll tilted her head, And Claire's own reflection did the same. She smashed it with a lamp. The glass shattered, revealing nothing behind it, just blackness. 6. Locked in. Claire tried to flee. The front door wouldn't open. Windows were sealed shut with something sticky like dried sap. Her skin burned where she touched it. The laughter followed her now, not distant, right behind her ears. Sometimes it was high and cheerful, sometimes low and hollow. At 3 a.m., she finally returned to the glass room. The glass case had been reconstructed, not repaired, not patched, rebuilt, but twisted. The case was taller now, darker, thicker. Inside it was Jonathan, not moving, not blinking, standing and smiling. The new display. Claire screamed, pounded the glass, begged him to respond. He didn't. His eyes followed her, but his mouth never opened. The plaque on the pedestal now read, "The Collector Who Stayed." She turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind her. From the mirrored walls came giggling echoes, the sound of tiny footsteps running in circles, whispers blooming in the corners. "He liked it here. So do you. Smile for us. Smile forever." 8. The vanishing. Weeks later, the estate was found abandoned. Neighbors called in after hearing laughter at night, children's laughter, echoing from empty halls. Police entered. They found no one, no Jonathan, no Claire, just a sealed room of glass. In the center stood 2 figures, a doll and a man, both smiling, both lifeless, or so it seemed. Surveillance footage showed the glass room empty, no figures, no displays, but when officers turned their backs, laughter and tiny footprints leading into the mirrors. 9. The final record. The only surviving evidence was a voicemail left by Claire on her brother's phone, timestamped 3:17 a.m., full of static, and in between, a voice. Her voice, terrified. "If you hear this, don't come. Don't look for me. She's in the glass, but she's also behind it. She smiles when you're not looking. She lives when no one's watching. Please don't smile back. That's how she gets in." Then laughter, and the message cuts. To epilogue. Smile for the camera. The estate was auctioned. The glass room was dismantled. The doll was never found. But in an antique shop in Glasgow, a strange statue appeared. Porcelain, Victorian dress, face cracked. She was placed in a glass cabinet near the front window. The shopkeeper claimed the doll had a charming smile. But every morning she seemed to be turned just slightly more toward the customer entrance. One day, the shop's security camera captured something odd. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the cabinet door opened on its own. And though the shop was empty, laughter filled the store. Soft, sweet, endless. End of part 3.